Hi, I'm 5.nm, and welcome to the show where we explore the fascinating, often overlooked corners of history. Now, we've all been there. You're typing an email, a text, a school paper, and you make a mistake. A simple typo, maybe "tay" instead of the, or an unfortunate autocorrect that changes ducking to, well, you know. Usually the consequences are minor. A bit of embarrassment, a quick correction, and life moves on. But what if I told you that some of the most pivotal, world-altering moments in human history hinged on just such a mistake? A single misplaced letter, a forgotten hyphen, a poorly translated word. These aren't just funny anecdotes. They are genuine historical events where the slip of a pen or the tap of the wrong key had monumental, often disastrous consequences. We're talking about mistakes that cost millions of dollars, altered the course of wars, rewrote religious texts, and even threatened to plunge the world into nuclear Armageddon. It's the butterfly effect, but for grammar nerds. A keystroke in one place creating a hurricane of consequences somewhere else. It's a powerful reminder that history isn't just shaped by grand gestures and powerful leaders, but also by the smallest, most human of errors. So today, we're going to dive into 10 instances where a simple typo didn't just cause a red squiggly line, but instead rewrote history itself. From sacred texts to space exploration, these stories reveal how fragile our carefully constructed world can be, and how a single character can hold the power to change everything. So grab your red pen, and let's get started. Let's start in 1631 London, with a story that's both shocking and, I have to admit, a little bit funny. The royal printers, Robert Barker and Martin Lucas, were commissioned to produce a new edition of the King James Bible. This was a prestigious, high-stakes job. You had one task: print the Holy Word of God accurately. Unfortunately, somewhere in the typesetting process for the Book of Exodus, a crucial three-letter word went missing. In the 10 Commandments, the 7th commandment, "Thou shalt not commit adultery," was printed as, "Thou shalt commit adultery," an instruction, not a prohibition. The error wasn't caught until about 1,000 copies of this wicked Bible, as it came to be known, were already in circulation. When the mistake was discovered, King Charles I was, to put it mildly, furious. He saw it as a moral and spiritual outrage. Barker and Lucas were dragged before the Star Chamber, fined the equivalent of tens of thousands of dollars today, and had their printing license revoked. Most of the copies were recalled and burned, making the few that survive incredibly rare and valuable collector's items. It's a stark lesson in proofreading. When you're printing the literal word of God, omitting the "not" is, shall we say, a rather significant oversight. Now let's jump forward to 1944, to one of the most critical moments of World War II, the D-Day landings in Normandy. The success of this massive invasion, codenamed Operation Overlord, was utterly dependent on one unpredictable factor: the weather. The Allied forces needed a full moon, a low tide, and relatively calm seas and skies. The job of predicting this perfect window fell to a team of meteorologists led by Group Captain James Stagg. The pressure was immense. The fate of the war rested on his forecast. The invasion was set for June 5th. However, as the date approached, Stagg's team predicted a storm. General Eisenhower, the supreme Allied commander, reluctantly postponed the invasion by 24 hours based on this forecast. What's less known is that in one of the initial weather reports transmitted from a ship off the coast of Ireland, a typist accidentally added an extra P to a code, indicating a rapid drop in barometric pressure that wasn't actually happening. This typo suggested the incoming storm might be even worse than it was, reinforcing Stagg's cautious prediction. While the storm was real, the typo amplified the concern, solidifying the decision to delay. The 24-hour delay proved crucial, as June 5th saw terrible weather, while June 6th offered the brief, clear window needed for the largest amphibious invasion in history to succeed. Our next story takes us to New Zealand in 1840, and a foundational document that has been a source of conflict ever since, the Treaty of Waitangi. This treaty was an agreement between the British Crown and over 500 Maori chiefs. The goal was to establish a British governor in New Zealand, recognize Maori ownership of their lands, and give Maori the rights of British subjects. The problem was, the treaty was drafted in English and then translated into Maori, and the two versions didn't say the same thing. This wasn't just a slight difference in phrasing. It was a fundamental disagreement born from a translation typo. In the English version, the Maori chiefs agreed to cede, absolutely, and without reservation, all the rights and powers of sovereignty. However, the Maori version used the word kawanatanga, which was a new word derived from the English governor. The Maori understood this to mean they were granting Britain the power of governance, a sort of administrative oversight, while they retained Tino Rangatiratanga, or their absolute chieftainship and authority over their lands and people. The British thought they were getting sovereignty. The Maori thought they were getting a governor and protection. This single, crucial mistranslation has been at the heart of legal and political disputes over land rights and sovereignty in New Zealand for nearly 2 centuries. The 1872 United States presidential election was already one for the history books. The incumbent, Ulysses S. Grant, was running for re-election against Horace Greeley. It was a pretty contentious campaign, but Grant won in a landslide. The real drama, though, happened after the election. Horace Greeley died on November 29, 1872, before the Electoral College could cast its votes. This created a totally chaotic situation, but the electoral votes intended for him were scattered among other candidates. When the official results were presented to Congress in 1873, the clerk had to read them out. In the official tally, a typo listed 42 electoral votes for Grant's running mate, Henry Wilson, as being for Grant himself. For a moment, it actually appeared that Grant had received votes for both president and vice president, which would have been a constitutional crisis. But honestly, the error was even more complicated. In the rush to document the messy post-Greeley vote, a clerk wrote down votes for a non-existent candidate, A.G. Braun instead of B. Gratz Brown, who was Greeley's running mate and did receive some votes. While these errors were eventually sorted out on the floor of Congress and didn't change the ultimate outcome of Grant's victory, they created immense confusion and really highlighted the potential for a simple clerical error to throw the world's most powerful democracy into chaos. The Rosetta Stone, discovered in 1799, is honestly one of the most important archaeological finds in history. Its inscription, written in 3 scripts, Hieroglyphic, Demotic, and Ancient Greek, was the key that unlocked the secrets of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. For decades, scholars like Jean-François Champollion painstakingly worked to decipher the code. But their early efforts were hampered by a fundamental misunderstanding, partly caused by what you could call a translation typo, or, well, more accurately, a misinterpretation of a single symbol. Early Egyptologists assumed that hieroglyphs were purely symbolic or ideographic, meaning each symbol represented a whole word or concept. They really struggled to make progress under this assumption. The breakthrough came when scholar Thomas Young and later Champollion realized that some hieroglyphs, particularly those enclosed in an oval shape called a cartouche, were phonetic. They represented sounds, like letters in an alphabet. One key clue was the cartouche for Ptolemy. A small, seemingly insignificant symbol of a folded cloth was initially misinterpreted. Champollion realized it actually represented the sound P. This phonetic realization, correcting the initial typo of interpretation, was the final piece of the puzzle, allowing the entire system to be decoded and opening up thousands of years of Egyptian history to the world. Our next story takes us to the dawn of the space race. On July 22, 1962, NASA launched the Mariner 1 probe, its first interplanetary mission destined for Venus. This was a huge moment for the American space program, a chance to score a major victory against the Soviets. The rocket lifted off from Cape Canaveral, and for a few minutes, everything seemed perfect. But then, the rocket began to veer dangerously off course, threatening to crash back down into a populated area or a shipping lane. Less than 5 minutes after launch, the range safety officer made the difficult decision to destroy it. So, what went wrong? An investigation revealed the cause was astonishingly simple. The guidance software on the ground-based computer system was supposed to take over if the rocket's internal guidance failed. In the handwritten code for that backup software, a programmer had omitted a single hyphen, also known as an overbar, in one of the guidance equations. This tiny typo, the absence of a single horizontal line, rendered the entire formula incorrect. When the rocket's less reliable onboard antenna lost contact, the faulty ground software took over and sent a series of erroneous commands, sending the rocket careening out of control. The mission, which cost the equivalent of over $150 million today, was lost because of a punctuation mark. On June 3, 1980, right at the height of the Cold War, the unthinkable happened. At the North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD, the screen suddenly lit up with a terrifying warning. The Soviet Union had launched a full-scale nuclear missile attack against the United States. Strategic Air Command bomber crews scrambled to their planes, and officials prepared to brief President Jimmy Carter, who was just minutes away from having to decide whether to launch a retaliatory strike that, well, could have ended the world. For several horrifying minutes, it honestly looked like the start of World War III. Then, just as panic reached its peak, the warning vanished. It was a false alarm. A subsequent investigation found the source of the near apocalypse. It wasn't a Soviet attack, but a computer error. A single, faulty computer chip in a communications device, a component that cost just 46 cents, had failed. During a routine test, instead of generating a 0 to represent 0 incoming missiles, the faulty chip had randomly spat out the number 2. The system interpreted this typo as a launch of 2 missiles, and then the error just kind of cascaded, filling the screens with phantom missile data. The world was brought to the brink of nuclear annihilation, not by a hostile act, but by a random hardware glitch that, unbelievably, produced the wrong digit. Wait, haven't we been here before? Yeah, we're returning to 1631 in the infamous Wicked Bible, because it's just too good a story to only mention once, and honestly, it contains more than one scandalous typo. We already discussed the most famous error, the commandment that encouraged adultery. But the printers, Robert Barker and Martin Lucas, were apparently having a very bad day, because that wasn't their only mistake in that print run. Their sloppiness was frankly biblical in proportion. In the book of Deuteronomy, a passage that should have read "The Lord our God is a great God" was printed with a typo that made it "The Lord, our God is a great ass." While less theologically damaging than the adultery commandment, it was definitely blasphemous and pretty offensive. This, and other minor errors scattered throughout the text, contributed to the outrage from the crown and the church. The Wicked Bible wasn't just a single isolated mistake. It was a masterclass in shoddy printing. It serves as a powerful testament to the fact that when your work is of great importance, even small errors can compound into a disaster of epic, and in this case, sacrilegious proportions. Let's move to a more modern environmental disaster. In March 2006, a pipeline at the Prudhoe Bay oil field in Alaska, operated by BP, ruptured and spilled over 200,000 gallons of crude oil across the tundra, making it the largest oil spill ever on Alaska's North Slope. The cleanup was massive, the environmental damage was severe, and the company faced huge fines and public backlash. The cause wasn't a natural disaster or a dramatic explosion. It was a slow, creeping failure born from a typo in a maintenance manual. Investigators discovered that the pipeline had suffered from severe internal corrosion. The maintenance protocols in place were supposed to prevent this. However, years earlier, a crucial number in a maintenance guide had been transcribed incorrectly. A guideline for the maximum allowable sediment level in the pipeline, a key indicator of corrosion risk, was typed out with a decimal point in the wrong place. This typo made the acceptable threshold for sediment seem much higher than it actually was. As a result, maintenance crews, following their manuals to the letter, believed the pipeline was in safe condition when it was, in fact, rotting from the inside out. A misplaced dot led directly to a massive environmental catastrophe. Our final story is a lesson in why you should always check your units, and it's another cautionary tale from NASA. In 1999, the Mars Climate Orbiter, a $125 million spacecraft, was sent on a mission to study the Martian climate and act as a communications relay for the Mars polar lander. After a nearly 10-month journey, the orbiter reached Mars and began its maneuver to enter orbit. But something went terribly wrong. The spacecraft approached the planet at a much lower altitude than planned, entered the atmosphere too steeply, and was either torn apart by atmospheric stresses or burned up. The investigation uncovered a mind-bogglingly simple error. The software on the ground, created by contractor Lockheed Martin, calculated the thruster firings in the English unit of pound-seconds. However, the software on the spacecraft itself, built by NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, was programmed to expect those calculations in the metric unit of Newton-seconds. Nobody caught the discrepancy. So, every time the ground crew sent a course correction, they were pushing the spacecraft with about 4.45 times less force than the orbiter's navigation system believed. This tiny but persistent typo in unit conversion caused the orbiter's trajectory to be off by a fatal margin, dooming the entire mission and wasting years of work and over $100 million. So there you have it. 10 stories where the course of history from religion and war to justice and science was nudged, or in some cases violently shoved, in a new direction by a simple typo, a missing knot, a misplaced hyphen, a unit conversion error, a single wrong digit. These aren't just quirks or footnotes, they are fundamental illustrations of a profound truth. The grand, sweeping narrative of human progress is built upon a foundation of countless tiny, individual actions, and any one of those actions can be flawed. It shows how systems, no matter how complex or expensive, are only as strong as their most basic components, right down to a single character of code or text. These events serve as a powerful and sometimes terrifying reminder of our own fallibility. The engineers at NASA, the royal printers of 17th century England, the military meteorologists, they were all experts in their fields, working on projects of immense importance. Yet a simple human error slipped through the cracks with massive consequences. It's a lesson in humility and a testament to the incredible, often unseen power that small details hold over our world. The difference between success and failure, between order and chaos, can sometimes be as small as a keystroke. So the next time you're writing an email, a report, or even just a text message, maybe take an extra second to read it over. Double-check your work. Proofread that document one last time. You probably won't prevent a war or save a multi-million-dollar space probe, but you'll be honoring the hard-learned lesson of history. Details matter. The smallest mistakes can have the biggest impact, and sometimes the fate of everything